On my son's wedding day, I stood at the edge of the grand hall, holding my trembling hands together hoping, just once, to feel like I belonged. But minutes later, in front of hundreds of guests, my own child looked me in the eyes and told me to leave. He didn't know that the woman he threw out like an unwanted burden would one day return. Not for revenge, not for forgiveness, but with a name that the entire nation already knew. And when I finally stepped on that stage, under the brightest lights, all I heard behind me was silence. His silence. Her silence. And the sound of their world collapsing. My name is Catherine Brooks, and I am 62 years old. If there is anything my life has taught me, it's this: you can give everything you have to the people you love, and still be treated like you never mattered. I learned that lesson slowly, drop by drop, bruise by bruise, across a lifetime shaped by quiet sacrifices and louder disappointments. But even then, I never imagined that my own son would become the final wound I had to survive. I live in Portland, Oregon, in a small, faded one-bedroom apartment with cracked kitchen tiles and a heater that sighs more than it works. For most of my life, this was the best I could manage. Not because I was lazy or hopeless or careless, but because life had handed me hardship wrapped in responsibilities, and I had accepted it all with my head bowed and my heart stubbornly strong. I became a mother at 22. I became a widow at 27. And I became a survivor at 28, because that's when I realized no one was coming to save me. My husband, Michael, had been the gentle part of my world, and when cancer took him in a matter of months, it felt like the lights inside my home had all gone out at once. Suddenly I was alone with a 5-year-old boy, my Ethan, who had eyes like mine and a smile like his father, but who needed stability I was terrified I couldn't give. So I worked. And then I worked more. And more. I cleaned houses in the mornings, scrubbed office floors in the evenings, and worked night shifts at a laundromat until my knees ached so badly that I would cry standing up. I never told Ethan about the crying. Mothers rarely do. I remember once, he must have been 8. He asked me why my hands always looked tired. Because they have a lot of work to do, baby, I told him. Back then he hugged me tightly. Back then, he cared. But as he grew, something inside him detached from me bit by bit, like a thread slowly pulling loose from a fabric until the whole thing begins to unravel. Ethan grew taller, stronger, more confident, but not kinder, not gentler, and not grateful. When he became a teenager, his tone changed first. Short, impatient, irritated. Then came the attitude, rolling eyes, heavy sighs, and comments that sliced deeper than he realized. You worry too much, Mom. Stop hovering. You don't understand anything. Why can't you be like other parents? Which parents? I wanted to ask. The ones who had money? The ones who had a husband? The ones who didn't work 18 hours a day? But I never asked. I never argued. I just worked harder. When he turned 16, he started demanding more expensive things. Shoes, clothes, gadgets, parties I couldn't afford. And when I said no, even gently, the resentment in his eyes hardened into something that broke a little piece of me every time. Sometimes I wondered if I'd failed him somehow, if maybe my poverty had embarrassed him, if maybe my worn-out clothes or my simple ways made him feel small. Children can be cruel when they're ashamed. But the truth was simpler and colder. Ethan was becoming selfish. A kind of selfishness that doesn't grow overnight. A kind that is watered quietly, slowly, by entitlement. By the time he turned 18, he had learned exactly how to take from me, financially, emotionally, and how to give nothing back. He never asked how I was. Never noticed when I skipped meals so he could eat better. Never realized that the reason I always wore the same 3 outfits was because I couldn't afford more. He knew nothing about the nights I walked home freezing because the bus fare had gone into his textbooks. Or the days I pretended my back pain wasn't killing me so he wouldn't feel burdened. Or the holidays I spent alone at work because the extra pay mattered more than my loneliness. But mothers don't speak of these things. We swallow them. We call them love. When Ethan reached his early 20s, he moved out, not to gain independence, but because he thought living with me held him back. He wanted a better lifestyle, as he called it. I helped him move into his first apartment. I paid the deposit. I bought his groceries. I hid my tears until I got home. And he barely called after that. Months passed. Then a year. I only heard from him when he needed something. Money for bills, help with rent, support for a course he wanted to take. I always gave him whatever I could. Sometimes even what I couldn't. I didn't realize it then, but those years were the slow construction of the wall he was building between us. Brick by brick, expectation by expectation, coldness by coldness. My son was growing into a man who knew how to take advantage of a mother's love. He didn't hate me. He didn't love me either. He simply used me. Until the day came, when even my presence became something he was ashamed of. But that part of my story, the part where my heart finally shattered, came later. Much later. For now I'll tell you this. Everything I became. Everything I built. Everything the world would one day applaud. All of it rose from the ashes of that boy's indifference. And I had no idea then that life was preparing me for a moment. A single, unforgettable moment. When the entire world would learn my name. Right in front of the son who once pushed me out of his. I still remember the morning of my son's wedding as clearly as if someone pressed it into my skin with a hot iron. The sky over Portland was a gentle shade of silver, the kind of soft winter light that usually brings comfort. But that day it felt cold, distant. Like even the weather knew I was walking into something that would change me forever. I woke up early before the alarm, the nervous energy in my body pulling me out of sleep. My hands shook as I pressed my old dress with the iron. It was light blue, simple, clean, carefully mended in two places where the stitching had come undone. I had bought the dress from a clearance rack at a thrift shop. It wasn't new, it wasn't expensive, but it was the best I could afford, and I wanted to look presentable on my only child's big day. I didn't have jewelry except for a pair of small silver earrings Michael had given me when Ethan was a baby. I wore them like armor, hoping maybe they'd bring me a little strength from a man who had once made me feel like I mattered. As I left the apartment, I whispered to myself, "Just smile, Catherine. Today is about Ethan." The wedding venue was a luxury resort hotel on the outskirts of Portland. Tall glass walls, shining marble floors, elegant fountains, and staff who walked like their feet had never touched anything but carpet. I felt small the moment I stepped inside, but I forced myself to keep moving. I waited in the lobby for Ethan. I had texted him earlier. "I'm here, sweetheart." No reply. Instead, one of the wedding planners approached me. "Are you staff?" she asked, looking me up and down. My face burned. "No, I'm the groom's mother." Her eyebrows lifted with surprise that felt like humiliation, before she gestured vaguely toward the upper hall. "You can walk through there. The guests are being seated." Guests. I swallowed the lump in my throat and followed her directions. When I walked into the main hall, my breath caught. Chandeliers sparkled like crystals falling from the sky. Tables were covered with ivory linens, golden cutlery, and roses so fresh they looked unreal. I had never seen a room so beautiful. And for a moment, just one sweet, foolish moment, I dared to think Ethan would smile when he saw me. That he would hug me. That today, he would remember I was his mother. But instead, what I got was a glance that cut deeper than a knife. Ethan looked at me, looked at my dress, and his jaw tightened with embarrassment. "Mom, what are you wearing?" he whispered harshly, grabbing my arm and pulling me aside. "People are looking." I felt the sting travel through my chest. I tried my best. It's clean and... It's not about clean, he snapped. It's about standards. That word, standards, crushed something inside me. Before I could respond, she walked in. Chelsea, my future daughter-in-law. A woman with perfect curls, a flawless white gown, and eyes that glanced at me like I was a stain on her wedding photos. Oh, she said softly, her voice dripping with a sweetness sharp enough to cut skin. You actually wore that? I froze. Ethan didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. He just looked away. Chelsea leaned closer, lowering her voice but making sure the bridesmaids around her heard every syllable. You just don't match the aesthetic of our event. This is a luxury wedding, Catherine. We have a theme. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't know there was a theme. Oh, there is, she said, smiling falsely. And unfortunately, you don't fit. A few guests nearby turned to watch. Someone whispered. Another chuckled softly. Heat rose up my neck. My eyes blurred. All I wanted was to celebrate my son's happiness. I never imagined I would become the embarrassment of the evening. Chelsea looked around, then stepped forward and said the sentence that shattered me completely. Maybe you should wait outside. Just for a bit. We don't want you ruining the photos. I stared at her, speechless. And then I stared at Ethan. My son. My only child. The boy I had raised with bleeding hands and tired bones. He didn't defend me. He didn't even meet my eyes. He simply exhaled sharply and said, Mom, please. Just go. Don't make this harder. My heart cracked open. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask him why, to ask what I had done. But before I could say a word, Chelsea's hand pressed against my shoulder, guiding me backward. Then came the moment that would replay in my mind for months. A small push. Not hard. Not violent. But dismissive. Cruel in its softness. A push that said, You are not wanted here. And then, I was outside the hall. Standing alone in the cold corridor. Surrounded by strangers who stared at me like I didn't belong. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My breath shook. My chest tightened. Inside, laughter burst like fireworks. Music started. Applause filled the air. My son's wedding was beginning. And I was not allowed to be a part of it. I stood there for several minutes, unable to move, unable to breathe. Every sacrifice I had made, every night I had spent working, every meal I had skipped, it all crashed into me like a wave of betrayal. Slowly, my body felt lighter, emptier, hollow. And when I finally walked out of that hotel, I whispered to myself, This ends today. If no one sees my worth, I'll build a life where they'll wish they had. That was the night I died. And the woman who walked forward was someone new. Someone who would one day shake the entire fashion industry. Someone the world would soon talk about. Someone even my son would learn to fear losing. But that part of my story comes later. Right now, all you need to know is this. The night Ethan threw me out of his wedding was the night I decided to stop being invisible. After I returned home from my son's wedding, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than ever before. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't change my clothes. I just sat on the edge of my bed with my hands shaking and my heart aching in a way I had never felt. Everything around me looked the same as it always did, but I felt like a stranger inside my own life. The dress I had worn still carried the scent of the hotel hall, the whispers, the humiliation, and the moment Ethan looked away instead of defending me. I don't remember how long I stayed there, staring at the wall. Eventually the weight became too much, and I broke. Tears came suddenly, uncontrollably, the kind of crying that comes from years of quiet suffering finally overflowing. I cried for the love I had given, for the sacrifices I had made, for the disrespect I had endured, and for the realization that my own child didn't want me anywhere near the happiest day of his life. When the tears finally stopped, I felt numb, like something inside me had collapsed. When morning light came through the thin curtains, I realized something strange. I felt empty, but not weak. I felt hurt, but not lost. For the first time in years, I felt a small and unfamiliar clarity. The life I had built around Ethan had ended last night. Maybe that meant I finally had the chance to build a life around myself. I got up, washed my face, tied my hair, and took out the small envelope of savings I had hidden in the back of a drawer. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't sit in that apartment and feel sorry for myself. I put on my old jeans and walked outside without planning anything. My feet took me toward a thrift store a few blocks away. I had cleaned that store many times during holiday seasons for extra money. When I pushed open the door, the familiar smell of old fabric and cheap detergent hit me, and for the first time since last night, I felt something other than pain. I walked through the aisles slowly, running my fingers over clothes that had been discarded, forgotten, thrown aside. Shirts with missing buttons. Jackets with torn seams. Dresses that had lost their shape. Clothes that people no longer wanted. Maybe that was why I felt drawn to them. I picked up items carefully, choosing pieces with strong fabric or interesting patterns. I didn't think of a business. I didn't think of success. I only thought of surviving. I filled a cart with worn-out clothes and used almost all of my small savings to buy them. The cashier asked if I was starting a business. I told her it was something like that, though I didn't know what that meant yet. Back home, I spread the clothes on my living room floor. My original plan was simple: wash them, fold them, resell them, make a little profit. I washed everything by hand, scrubbing stains until my fingers ached. As the clothes dried near the window, something unexpected happened. I picked up a denim jacket that looked outdated but sturdy. I held it for a long moment, studying the seams, the pockets, the potential it still had. Something inside me shifted. I took out the small box of leftover fabric pieces I had kept over the years. I gathered scissors, thread, needles, and whatever I had. I sat on the floor and started working without any plan or pattern. My hands moved on their own, cutting, stitching, shaping, patching. Hours passed without me noticing. When I finally lifted the jacket to look at it, my breath caught. It looked completely different. It didn't look old anymore. It didn't look discarded. It didn't look unwanted. It looked bold, stylish, unique, alive. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud of something I had created. Not as a mother, not as a widow, not as someone struggling to survive, but as a woman who still had something to offer the world. I took a few pictures with my old phone and posted the jacket on a small online marketplace. I didn't expect anything to happen. But 12 minutes later, someone messaged me asking if it was still available. Then another message came. Then another. By the end of the day, the jacket was sold. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the realization that I still had a future. A small spark had lit itself inside me, and I had no idea how big the fire would one day become. But that first jacket, that simple redesign, was the moment my life quietly turned in a new direction, even if I didn't understand it yet. Selling that first jacket gave me a strange kind of confidence I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and real. The kind of confidence that doesn't shout, it simply pulls you forward. I spent the next morning sorting through the rest of the clothes I had bought. Dresses with crooked seams, shirts with outdated collars, skirts with missing buttons. I washed everything again, this time with more care. As I worked, I started imagining what each piece could become. A dress didn't have to stay a dress. A shirt didn't have to stay a shirt. I looked at every item like it had potential, like it was waiting for someone to believe in it. Maybe I was too. I sat on the floor with a pair of scissors and let instinct guide me. I changed the shape of sleeves, added layers of fabric, turned wide collars into sharp, modern lines, and stitched patterns that came straight from memory. I didn't follow trends. I didn't copy designs. I created things the way women like me create their lives, by taking what's broken, what's discarded, what's forgotten, and turning it into something worth looking at. My tiny apartment slowly turned into a workshop. My couch was covered in fabric scraps. My kitchen table became a cutting station. My windowsills held drying clothes instead of plants. My hands worked until late at night, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel tired from pain, I felt tired from purpose. I posted a few redesigned pieces online. They sold quickly. Not for much, but enough. Enough to pay the rent. Enough to buy more thrift clothes. Enough to remind me that I was capable of surviving without Ethan, without anyone. One afternoon, while sorting through a pile of denim, I reached into my bag and pulled out a notebook I had kept for grocery lists. On the front cover, I wrote 2 words without thinking too much. Second chance. I stared at the words for a moment. They felt right. Everything I touched was getting a second chance. And maybe deep down so was I. That night, I went back to the thrift store, not with hesitation, but with intention. I filled a cart with jackets, skirts, tops, and anything with strong fabric that could be transformed. The cashier recognized me this time. "Back already?" she asked with a smile. "Yes," I said. "I need more pieces." She nodded like she understood something I wasn't ready to say out loud. I wasn't just buying clothes anymore. I was building something. Back home, I worked faster, more confidently. Every redesign became bolder. I experimented with asymmetrical cuts, layered textures, hand-stitched details, and unexpected color combinations. My fingers moved with a precision I didn't know I had. My ideas came easily, almost like they had always been inside me waiting for permission to come out. I started photographing my pieces more carefully. I used natural sunlight, simple backgrounds, and angles that showed the details clearly. The pictures still weren't professional, but they were honest, and honesty has a beauty of its own. Orders increased. Messages increased. People started asking, "Who makes these? Do you take custom requests? Do you have a brand name?" Every time someone asked about the brand, I wrote the same thing. Second Chance Apparel. I created a small page using that name and uploaded my redesigned clothes. I didn't use my picture. I didn't tell my story. I didn't reveal anything personal. I wasn't ready for that, not yet. I wanted the work to speak before the world ever knew who was behind it. And it did. Every design I posted sold out. People wrote reviews saying the clothes felt meaningful, original, full of personality. Some said they could tell they were made by someone with a lot of heart. They didn't know the heart behind it was bruised, but still beating. Within a few weeks, I was making enough to cover my bills without worrying. Within a few months, I didn't need my cleaning jobs anymore. Within half a year, people began recognizing the name Second Chance Apparel even without my page. But I still stayed hidden. I never showed my face. I never told my past. I never connected the brand to my personal life. It wasn't fear. It was protection. The world knew my work. They didn't need to know me yet. And while my life slowly started to stabilize, something much bigger was coming. Something I didn't expect. Something I wasn't prepared for. One day, while scrolling through my messages, I saw a notification that made my hands freeze. A popular TikTok fashion influencer, someone with millions of followers, had ordered one of my jackets. I held the package in my lap, staring at it for a long moment before closing the box gently, sealing it, and carrying it to the post office. When the clerk took it from my hands, I whispered a silent prayer, not for luck, but for possibilities. 3 days later, everything changed. 3 days after shipping that jacket, my phone started vibrating non-stop. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A glitch. Maybe a spam attack. Dozens of notifications stacked over each other, then hundreds, coming so fast that my screen froze. When it finally resumed, the very first message I opened made my heartbeat slam against my ribs. It was from the influencer herself. She had posted a video titled, "This jacket is from a brand called Second Chance Apparel, and I don't think I've ever worn something this creative." I pressed play with trembling fingers. She stood in front of a mirror, turning slowly to show every angle. The jacket looked completely different in her video, more alive, more powerful, more intentional. She kept pointing to the stitching on the sleeves, the layered denim panels, the abstract hand-embroidered detail I had added at the last minute because it felt right. Everyone in the comments was obsessed. "Where is this from? What brand is this? I've never seen anything like it. Why does this look expensive and handmade at the same time? Second Chance Apparel? Who is the designer?" The video crossed 1 million views in 6 hours. By the next morning, it had surpassed 5 million. And in the small apartment where I sat with my worn-out scissors and dollar store thread, it felt unreal. Like I was watching a stranger's life. Like someone else was living the moment I had never even allowed myself to dream about. Orders exploded. 10, 20, 50, hundreds. My tiny living room looked like a miniature warehouse. The hallway outside my apartment began filling with sealed boxes. I had to call the post office ahead of time because people assumed I was running a small company. I wanted to laugh at the irony. A small company? No. It was just me. A woman who once stood at her son's wedding door wearing a borrowed dress and shoes she could barely afford. Now the world wanted her work. It felt powerful, but it also felt personal. Because every stitch I made carried pieces of my past. Every design came from pain, from survival, from lessons learned the hard way. And yet the world wasn't just buying the clothes. They were buying the intention behind them. The resilience shaped into every seam. Within a few months, I outgrew my apartment. I found a tiny studio in the old industrial part of Portland. Just a single room, rough brick walls, dusty windows, and cold floors. I swept it myself, cleaned the walls until my hands hurt, and set up folding tables against the windows where the sunlight was strongest. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. I registered my brand properly, trademarked it, opened a business account, created official packaging, added a small tag to each piece that read, "Second Chance Apparel, redesigned with purpose." Customers began posting their own photos, then bloggers. Then magazines that previously ignored every email I ever sent. Slowly, the articles started appearing. Second Chance Apparel, the brand changing the meaning of sustainable fashion. The mysterious designer behind the viral reworked jacket trend. The silent revolution of an anonymous American designer. Anonymous. That word protected me. It shielded me from my past. It separated Catherine Brooks from the brand everyone was suddenly talking about. I liked it that way. I needed it that way. Because while my business grew, my personal life stayed completely untouched. Ethan didn't know. His wife didn't know. His friends didn't know. No one visited me. No one asked where I worked after throwing me out. No one cared enough to wonder. I was invisible to them. And strangely, that invisibility became my strength. With time, I hired 2 young designers and 1 part-time assistant. They didn't know my story either. I simply told them I preferred my identity to stay private because the brand should stand on its own. They respected it. Months passed. Sales doubled, then tripled. Celebrities began wearing my redesigned coats. Fashion journalists speculated about who I might be. Some thought I was a retired designer from a luxury house. Some thought I was a young genius who wanted privacy. Some thought I was a collective of artists. Not one person ever guessed the truth. That I was a 62-year-old mother who had been thrown out of her son's wedding for wearing old clothes. One night, while reviewing sales reports, my assistant walked into my studio with her phone in her hand and an expression I couldn't read. "You need to see this," she said. A major industry association, one of the most respected in the entire country, had released its list of nominees for the annual Impact Awards. Second Chance Apparel was nominated for Designer of the Year. Me. A woman who once stitched clothes on her kitchen table. A woman whose own son believed she was worthless. A woman who had walked through humiliation with tears burning behind her eyes. Now I was being recognized on a national stage. The event would take place in New York City. A grand ballroom. Hundreds of prominent guests. Fashion icons. Entrepreneurs. Influencers. Politicians. Celebrities. And as fate would have it, Ethan and his wife would be there too, because his wife's cousin was one of the coordinators, and they attended every major event they could slip into. But they wouldn't know. They wouldn't suspect anything. To them, I was still the poor, unimportant woman they had humiliated and thrown away. They didn't know the brand that changed my life belonged to the mother they discarded. They didn't know that the woman they pushed out of their world had built a new one without them. They didn't know that the night I stepped into that award ceremony would be the night their world shattered. And for once, the anticipation didn't scare me. It healed me. I wasn't going there for revenge. I was going there to finally be seen. Not as a servant. Not as a burden. Not as an embarrassment. But as the woman I had always been beneath the pain. The world knew my brand. Now it was time for them to know me. The week leading up to the event felt unreal. My team buzzed with excitement, the studio filled with whispered guesses about who might win, what designers would attend, how enormous the press coverage would be. I listened quietly, keeping my hands busy with the fabric in front of me, pretending my name wasn't attached to any of it. The anonymity protected me, but it also felt strangely like a secret on the verge of bursting through the seams. I didn't tell anyone I was the founder. Not the girls who stitched beside me, not the assistant who mailed out orders, not the building manager who sometimes helped me carry boxes to my car. They only knew me as Catherine, the woman who ran operations, coordinated production, and gave guidance on designs. No one questioned why all final decisions came through me. No one questioned why reporters emailed me instead of a CEO. Everyone assumed I was simply part of a larger structure, because no one could imagine that the woman quietly steaming a jacket in the corner was the one who built the brand from the ground up. The day before the ceremony, I received the official invitation. Thick cardstock, gold lettering, my name printed clearly. Ms. Catherine Brooks, founder, Second Chance Apparel. Seeing it written that way felt like someone had placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. For years, I had worked in silence. Now my identity was finally stepping forward, not because I chased validation, but because my work had become impossible to ignore. That night, I sat alone at my small kitchen table with the envelope beside me, untouched food on my plate, my mind drifting back to the moment Ethan threw me out. The echo of his words felt distant now, like a memory wrapped in dust. "You're embarrassing us, Mom." The way his wife looked at me, scanning my dress, smirking at my shoes. The humiliation. The sting. The shame that sunk into my chest until breathing felt heavy. I remembered standing outside that wedding venue, the laughter inside muffled, the cold wind touching my face like sympathy. I remembered thinking that maybe this was all I would ever be, a woman who raised a child only to be discarded by him. But now, as I held the invitation, I realized something simple and liberating. Their rejection did not define me. Their cruelty did not limit me. Their judgment did not diminish me. My evolution happened because I kept going. Despite them. Without them. Beyond them. The next morning, I stepped into the studio before sunrise. The air was cool, the dim light spilling across rolls of fabric. For a moment, it felt strange to think about leaving behind all this. The machines, the threads, the soft music that usually played in the background, if even for one night. It had become my sanctuary, the place where I rebuilt myself. By noon, the team insisted I leave early to get ready. They didn't know why, but they felt something was special about the night. My assistant handed me a garment bag with a shy smile. "We made you something. Just trust us." I carried it home without opening it. When I finally unzipped the bag in my bedroom, I felt my breath stop. It was a floor-length black gown, simple but striking, tailored to perfection, with a subtle stitched detail along the neckline, an homage to the very first jacket I had redesigned. They had taken my signature style and turned it into a dress worthy of a red carpet. My eyes stung. No one had made anything for me in years. Not a birthday card, not a holiday gift, not even a handwritten note. And here was something crafted with care, with intention, from people who didn't even know who I truly was. That evening, as I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric against my hips, I barely recognized myself. Not because of the dress, or the soft waves in my hair, or the light makeup that framed my eyes. I didn't recognize myself because, for the first time in so many years, I looked like a woman who believed she deserved to be seen. I left for the airport with a calmness I didn't expect. The flight was quiet, my mind steady, my pulse soft. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't overwhelmed. I wasn't afraid. New York greeted me with a rush of lights, the energy of the city vibrating under my feet. The hotel staff welcomed me like they knew who I was even before I checked in. Yet another reminder that the world recognized my work even before it recognized my face. When I arrived at the venue that night, the grand ballroom draped in gold lights, with camera flashes sparking like stars, it took my breath for a moment. People in tailored suits and glittering gowns moved across the marble floors with champagne glasses in hand. Influencers posed against step-and-repeat banners. Reporters tightened grips on their microphones. And somewhere in this crowd, my son and his wife were here too. I saw them before they saw me, standing near the center, surrounded by a small group, laughing, showing off as they always did. His wife wore a shimmering gown that looked expensive but ordinary. Ethan wore a tuxedo that fit him well, but nothing about him stood out. They looked exactly the way they always wanted to be seen, important, admired, central. But tonight, they were about to witness something they never expected. A young woman with a headset approached me with a warm smile. "Ms. Brooks? We've been waiting for you. The stage announcement is in about 15 minutes. Please follow me." My heart began to thud, not with fear, but with clarity. This was the moment every step of my journey had been leading toward. The moment I would no longer be invisible. The moment they would see me, truly see me, for the first time. As I walked behind the coordinator, the murmurs in the ballroom shifted, a subtle ripple moving through the crowd as people turned their heads. Cameras swung in my direction. Whispers rose. "Is that her? That's the founder? She looks nothing like I imagined. Oh my God, that's Catherine Brooks." I felt the air change. I felt the recognition settle. I felt the truth rising like dawn. And then, just as I stepped into the main aisle, the moment I had imagined without meaning to finally arrived. Ethan turned. His eyes landed on me. His smile faded. His posture stiffened. And for the first time in his life, my son looked unsure. His wife shot him a confused look, then followed his gaze. Her expression shifted instantly, from curiosity to disbelief to a pale, shaking shock. They recognized me. But not as the woman they discarded. They recognized me as the woman the entire room was turning toward. They recognized me as the founder of the brand the world couldn't stop talking about. And their faces, drained of color, frozen in disbelief, were the clearest confirmation of all. They had no idea who their mother really was. For a moment, everything around me dimmed. The chandelier lights above blurred into soft halos, the chatter of the crowd faded into a distant hum, and all I could hear was the quiet thunder of my own heartbeat. Ethan stood frozen, his mouth parted as if trying to form a word but unable to speak. His wife clutched his arm, her perfectly manicured fingers digging into his sleeve, her eyes wide with disbelief. I didn't stop walking. I didn't rush. I moved through the crowd with a calm grace that felt unfamiliar but strangely natural, like I had stepped into a version of myself that had been waiting patiently behind a locked door for years. People stepped aside for me without being asked. They whispered my name with reverence. Some lifted their phones to take pictures. Others simply stared, their faces illuminated by curiosity and admiration. Ethan's wife finally whispered something to him, her voice sharp and panicked. He didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on me as if someone had taken the floor out from under him. For the first time since he became an adult, he looked small. Not because I was intimidating, but because the truth had caught up to him in a single devastating blow. I reached the front of the hall where the organizers stood waiting. A tall man in a navy suit offered me a respectful nod. "Miss Brooks, it's an honor to have you," he said, and guided me toward a reserved seat near the stage. The velvet chair had my name printed on a sleek silver plaque. I sat down quietly, smoothing my dress, feeling the weight of the moment settle around me. Behind me, I could sense Ethan and his wife slowly approaching. They weren't bold enough to come close, not yet, but their confusion was almost palpable. I could imagine the questions spinning in their heads. How did she get here? Why is everyone looking at her? Why is her name written on that seat? Why does the staff know her? How is she part of this world? Who is she? A young reporter approached me before the ceremony began. She leaned down with her microphone, smiling brightly. "Miss Brooks, if you're willing, we'd love a quick quote. Your rise has been incredible. Millions of people admire your work." I smiled politely, nodding. She switched on the mic and gestured lightly. "What inspired the second chance movement?" she asked. Second chance. My brand. My story wrapped into 2 words. I inhaled gently. "I wanted to remind people," I said softly, "that where you start doesn't dictate where you end. Every life, every heart, every story deserves another chance." Her face lit up, and she thanked me before walking away. As she left, I saw the way Ethan stared after her, then at me, then at the stage, trying to make sense of everything. The ceremony began. Golden lights dimmed. Applause echoed across the hall. The host introduced keynote speakers, award categories, and the night's high-profile guests. My name appeared multiple times on the giant screen behind the stage. Founder. Visionary. Creative force. Every time it flashed, I felt another cord inside me loosen, another shadow fall away, another wound quietly close. Halfway through the event, the ballroom lights shifted again, and the host stepped forward with an excited smile. "Tonight," he announced, "we have the honor of celebrating the incredible success of the brand that redefined sustainable fashion and inspired a national movement. Please welcome our special guest of honor, Ms. Catherine Brooks, the founder of Second Chance Apparel. Applause erupted. Cameras turned toward me. People rose from their seats. The spotlight swept across the room until it landed directly on me. I stood slowly. My dress shimmered under the lights. The room looked breathtaking, a sea of faces, admiration glowing in their eyes. But even as I stepped forward, the only two faces I truly saw were Ethan's and his wife's. Ethan's hands hung limp at his sides. His expression was hollow, devastated. His mouth trembled like he wanted to speak but couldn't. His wife looked like someone had ripped the floor out from beneath her dreams. She gripped his arm tighter, her jaw clenched, her breath shaky. The anger, the entitlement, the smug superiority, they were all gone. What remained was fear. And guilt. And the sudden, crushing awareness of what they had thrown away. I walked toward the stage, my heels quiet on the polished floor. The applause washed over me like a warm tide. When I reached the steps, two ushers offered their hands to steady me. I nodded gratefully and climbed, my heart steady and calm. Standing at the podium, facing the glittering room, I finally understood something astonishing. I wasn't here to prove anything. I wasn't here to show my son what he lost. I wasn't here to answer for the humiliation they caused me. This moment wasn't about them at all. This moment belonged to me. I offered the audience a serene smile. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady. "When I started this journey, I didn't have a team, or money, or connections. I just had old clothes, a washing machine, a needle, and a belief that beauty can come from broken things. Including people." A soft murmur flowed through the room. I never imagined my story would lead me here. But tonight isn't about my success. It's about every person who has ever wanted a second chance. The room fell silent, hanging onto every word. When I finished, the applause returned, louder this time, almost overwhelming. I stepped back from the podium, the host shaking my hand warmly before escorting me to my seat. As I walked down the steps, Ethan moved forward a few inches as if trying to gather the courage to speak. His lips parted. His eyes softened. But when he saw the calm resolve on my face, when he saw that I no longer needed anything from him, his courage collapsed. He froze. And I walked right past him without a word. I didn't glance at him. I didn't pause. I didn't hesitate. I simply walked, graceful, steady, whole. The story of my life had finally shifted. I was no longer the mother begging for respect. I was the woman the world stood up for. And nothing, not even his regret, could touch that truth anymore. I continued walking through the ballroom, each step steady and unhurried, letting the noise of the applause fade behind me. The music shifted to something elegant and soft, filling the space between conversations. People smiled at me, nodded politely, some even whispered quick congratulations as I passed. But I barely noticed any of it. My heart was beating with a strange mixture of peace and power, an emotion I had never known before this night. I found my table near the stage, a beautifully arranged setting with my name printed in silver on a black card. As I sat down, the clinking of glasses and soft chatter resumed around me, the room slowly returning to its glamorous rhythm. But somewhere behind me, I sensed Ethan still standing frozen in the aisle, unable to process what had happened. For the first time in my life, I didn't turn around to check on him. I didn't wonder what he was thinking. I didn't ache to be understood. I didn't hope for reconciliation. That part of me was gone. A waiter approached with a tray of sparkling water and wine. Before he could even ask, I pointed to the water. "Thank you," I said, and he smiled warmly. Even the smallest gestures felt different tonight, lighter, freer, like my soul had unclenched after years of holding itself together. I took a slow sip and let the coolness settle in my chest. Moments later, a shadow fell across my table. I looked up, expecting another reporter or perhaps an organizer with a question. Instead, I saw someone who made the entire night shift once again, but in a calmer, more human way. The chief guest of the event, a man in his late 50s, well known for founding one of the nation's largest philanthropic foundations, stood in front of me with a respectful smile. His presence commanded attention without force. Tall, composed, confident in the way only self-made people often are. "Catherine Brooks," he said warmly. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." I rose instinctively and shook his hand. "Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor." "No," he said, shaking his head with genuine sincerity. "The honor is ours. What you've created, it's inspiring. Transformative. Your work has changed lives in ways I don't think you fully realize." I opened my mouth to respond but found no words. For years, no one had spoken to me like that. Not with admiration, not with genuine respect, not with an understanding of what it takes to build something from nothing. He continued, "When your designs went viral, we noticed something unusual. People weren't just buying clothes. They were telling stories. Stories of healing, renewal, self-worth. You didn't just create a brand, Catherine. You created a movement." My throat tightened. Movement. The very thing I built out of loneliness, pain, and old discarded fabric was now touching strangers in places I had never even visited. He gently gestured toward the stage. "We're planning a national campaign next year. I'd like you to be a part of it. Not just as a designer, but as a voice. I believe the country needs to hear your story." The room suddenly felt warmer. Before I could respond, another presence appeared at the edge of my vision, hesitant, trembling, unsure. Ethan. He stood a few feet away, not close enough to interrupt, but close enough that he wanted me to know he was there. His wife hovered beside him, silent now, her expression pinched with discomfort. The chief guest noticed them but didn't acknowledge them. Instead, he turned back to me with a soft, knowing smile. "You deserve this," he said simply. No one had ever said those words to me in my entire life. Not when I raised a child alone. Not when I struggled to pay rent. Not when I washed clothes until my fingers cracked. Not when I spent evenings sketching designs by the light of a flickering lamp. Not when the world dismissed me as invisible. But now, someone who mattered, someone the world listened to, saw me, and believed in me. Without condition. Without judgment. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. "I would be honored," I whispered. He nodded, satisfied, and excused himself to greet others. As he walked away, Ethan finally stepped closer. I didn't stand. I didn't soften. I didn't offer a smile. I simply looked up at him, waiting. He swallowed hard, his throat visibly tight. "Mom. The word cracked, falling apart before he could finish. His wife looked as though she wanted to drag him away, but he didn't move. "Mom," he tried again, eyes glossy. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." There it was, the sentence children always use when they want forgiveness without accountability. I held his gaze, calm and still, letting the silence stretch until it became something he couldn't escape. Finally, I spoke, quiet, steady, without anger, without softness. "You weren't supposed to know." He blinked, confused. I leaned back slightly. "Because success wasn't meant to teach you a lesson. Life was." He flinched like the words hit a bruise he'd been hiding. His mouth opened again, desperate. "Please, can we talk? Just for a moment." Once, those words would have shattered me. Once, I would have said yes instantly, wiping away everything he ever did. Once, I would have rearranged my entire soul just to hold him close. But not tonight. Not after everything. Not after being thrown out of his wedding like trash. Not after rebuilding myself from the ground up while he never looked back. Not after discovering the strength I never knew I had. I rose slowly from my chair. His eyes lit up with hope, only for that hope to fade as I stepped around him instead of toward him. "We had our moment," I said softly. "You chose your side." He reached for my arm, but I gently moved away. "And now," I added, my voice steady as stone, "I choose mine." I walked past him with the same quiet grace I carried on stage, leaving him standing there in the middle of a room filled with powerful strangers who now knew exactly who I was, and exactly who he wasn't. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel loss. I felt free. I walked away from Ethan and didn't look back. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because the part of me that once lived for his approval no longer existed. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor as I made my way toward the quieter side of the ballroom, where the large windows revealed the glittering skyline of New York City. The city lights shimmered like scattered diamonds, reflecting the calm I felt inside. For years, I had imagined what it would be like if my son ever came back to me, what I would say, how tightly I would hug him, how everything would somehow become whole again. But tonight, I understood a truth I should have learned long ago: a mother's love is unconditional, but her dignity must never be optional. I paused near the window, taking in the view. The city looked alive and endless, a reminder that my story had not ended, it had only just begun. A soft voice approached from behind. "Miss Brooks." I turned and saw a young woman, maybe in her 20s, holding a program booklet. Her hands trembled slightly. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but I just wanted to say, thank you. Your brand saved me." The world softened. She continued, her voice shaky. "After my divorce, I lost everything. I couldn't afford new clothes for job interviews. Someone told me about second chance. I bought one blazer, one skirt, and it made me feel like myself again. Today, I'm working at a law firm. I just wanted you to know, what you created matters." Emotion rose in my throat like a tide. I gently held her hand and whispered, "You did that. Not the clothes." She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "No, ma'am. You gave me the confidence to believe I still had value." When she walked away, I felt something inside me anchor deeper, a reminder that life had given me more than pain. It had given me purpose. A few minutes later, a group of designers approached me. They introduced themselves one by one, each praising my work, my approach, my vision. Some asked for guidance. Others asked for collaborations. One woman asked if I would mentor her daughter. Their words felt genuine, admiration without agenda. I realized something profound. These people didn't know me as someone's mother. They knew me as someone who mattered. And that was enough. Suddenly, near the center of the ballroom, I heard raised voices, hushed but tense. I turned subtly and saw Ethan's wife, red-faced and furious, whispering sharply at him. She waved her hands in frantic gestures, her expression twisted with humiliation. People nearby tried not to stare, but whispers spread like ripples across water. She must have realized exactly what she had lost, and what she had thrown away with her own arrogance. Ethan didn't argue back. His head hung low, shoulders slumped, eyes downcast. He looked like a man who had finally met the full weight of his choices. I didn't approach them. I didn't interfere. Their problems were no longer mine. Life had brought them to this moment, and life itself would take them forward from here. Some lessons cannot be softened, not even by a mother's heart. As I turned away, a staff member approached and informed me that a private reception was being held for key guests and speakers in a smaller room upstairs. I was requested to join. I agreed, and as I walked toward the grand staircase, I felt no heaviness, only a steady, grounded peace. Behind me, I sensed Ethan looking in my direction again, but I didn't turn. Some stories end quietly, not with tears or dramatic confrontations, but with simple clarity. And I had finally reached mine. Upstairs, the reception room glowed with warm lights, soft jazz playing in the background. A buffet of delicate appetizers filled one corner. The atmosphere was calm, intimate, filled with thoughtful conversations and quiet admiration. As I entered, the chief guest approached again. "I'm glad you came," he said warmly. "I wanted to speak to you privately. Your message tonight was remarkable." I smiled. "Thank you. I just spoke from the truth." "That's exactly why it resonated," he replied. "Authenticity is rare these days. People cling to it." We spoke for several minutes, about future plans, potential projects, and ways to expand the movement across the country. He listened with genuine interest. He valued my perspective. He saw me not as someone to exploit, but as someone to learn from. Halfway through the conversation, he looked at me with a curious expression. "I don't mean to intrude," he said gently, "but earlier, when you walked in, I saw a young man look at you like he knew you." The expression on his face, well, it carried a kind of grief. "Is he family?" I took a slow breath. "He was," I said simply. The man nodded with understanding. "Then I won't ask more. But I will say this, sometimes the world recognizes us long before the people we love do. It doesn't make your light any less bright." His words settled into me like a calm, warm tide. The evening continued with more conversations, more handshakes, more people wanting to connect. For once, I didn't feel shy or out of place. I belonged there, not because of luck, not because of chance, but because I had earned every inch of my journey. Eventually, as the night grew late, I decided to leave. I walked out of the building slowly, the cool air brushing against my skin. A black car waited outside to take me back to my hotel. Before stepping inside, I paused and looked up at the tall, glowing skyscrapers. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who washed old clothes alone in a tiny apartment, the one who cried quietly after being thrown out of her son's wedding, the one who believed her life was slipping away unseen. That woman was gone. Not forgotten. Just transformed. I stepped into the car, closed the door gently, and allowed myself one final thought as the city lights drifted past the window. I never needed them to see my worth. I just needed to see it myself. And now, I finally did. The car ride back to the hotel was quiet, the soft hum of the engine blending with the distant noise of the city. I leaned my head back against the seat, letting the weight of the night settle around me. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't painful. It felt like a chapter closing exactly when it needed to. When I reached my room, I slipped off my heels and walked to the window. The lights of Manhattan stretched endlessly, each glowing square in the skyline a reminder that millions of people were living their own stories. Some rising, some falling, some searching for the courage I had finally found. I changed into something comfortable, washed off the makeup, and let my hair fall freely around my shoulders. For a moment, I stared at my reflection. I didn't see the woman who was thrown out of a wedding. I didn't see the mother who cried alone in a small apartment. I didn't even see the founder who had just been honored before a national audience. I saw a woman who survived herself. A woman who rebuilt herself. A woman who finally understood her worth. As I sat on the edge of the bed, my phone buzzed, 3 messages from Ethan. "Mom, can we please talk? I'm sorry. Please. I didn't know. Please don't leave like this." I stared at the screen for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Years ago, I would have answered within seconds. Tears in my eyes, hope in my chest, desperate for even a small piece of love. But tonight, I felt only calm. My son's regret was his journey, not mine. His apology was his burden, not my healing. I turned the phone face down and placed it on the nightstand. Then I stood, walked back to the window, and let the city's glow wash over me. I thought of the young woman who thanked me earlier, the one who said my clothes helped her rebuild her life. I thought of the designers who wanted my guidance. I thought of the future campaign the chief guest wanted me to lead. I thought of all the people wearing my designs right now, feeling a little braver, a little stronger, a little more whole. And for the first time in decades, I felt something I had not felt since motherhood consumed my identity. I felt proud of myself. Not as someone's mom. Not as someone's mistake. Not as someone's burden. But as Catherine Brooks, the woman I had become. A soft gust of wind brushed the windowpane. I imagined the version of myself who once begged for love standing beside me. I wanted to tell her, "You didn't fail. You just loved the wrong people in the right way." I closed the curtains gently, turned off the lights, and lay down. The sheets felt cool and soft, the pillow catching the quiet sigh that escaped my lips. I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I didn't wish things had been different. I simply felt free. Before sleep pulled me under, one final thought settled in my heart, a truth I had earned with every tear, every stitch, every lonely night, every quiet triumph. Sometimes the people who break you never come back to fix you. But sometimes, you rise so high that you no longer need them to. And with that my story, my real story, finally came home.